Welcome everyone. Since my esteemed colleague in the last session sat down, I'm going to sit down as well. Or I could stand, but you all have to stand with me. Sit. All right. So I held off the introduction slide. You notice the star floated from the bottom up. So the theme here, cloud security from the bottom up. Kudos to you all first who made security a priority, particularly lasting the end of the day. For that, you'll earn the emblematic hardened security star. The reality, I'm actually going to use that star to call out the touch points in context to the principles that we're reviewing on each side, so it's going to be important. While the session titling and the synopsis is framed around cloud, its principles extend to a wider range of non-cloud and hybrid scenarios and spoken to more broadly. We'll be reviewing defenses in depth and security hardening considerations as you expose IRIS services out of the deployment perimeter. Okay, agenda. Setting the stage, brief extension of introductions, where your relevance may be in the IRIS ecosystem and how our interests intersect in today's session. IAM, the importance of persona IAM, identity and roles, a fundamental pillar of the concepts we'll be discussing and key starting point for constructing secure posture strategies. The Zero Trust, MTLS certificates, principles of trust nowhere, verify everywhere, complementary enforcement mechanisms at the transport and identity control planes with focus on the transport trust plane. Whitelisting, avoiding open public access, reducing the blast radius and attack surface, narrow to the client and server domain. REST, reviewing strong authentication schemes as part of the identity trust plane, protecting IRIS APIs. And securing external data sources, an example using an IRIS assumed cloud role for accessing external resources. Okay, so setting the stage. Additional about me, 3 years with InterSystems, as the introduction slide said, principal security architect working for the architecture and assurance engineering team with security focus. Roles that are most relevant here for the session, guiding cloud and hybrid security posture, InterSystems offerings to cloud, security requirements, architecture deployment assessments and consulting, and some tangent things, governance policies, threat modeling, observability, response. Some things about you may have existing any flavor, I call them any flavor IRIS deployments, on-prem, cloud hybrid, and somewhat versed in cloud. These may be self-managed, managed service, or InterSystems cloud hosted, and hopefully have an interest in extending IRIS services outward, such as XDBC, REST, operational interfaces, data flows, and our intersection for the session, securing the expanded attack surface. So the start, the importance of persona IAM, a good security posture starts with good identity management. All highlights call out varied role system personas in lieu of an anonymous user group. This allows for ZAuth bindings of identity and access privilege based on persona. Further, it can then filter the flow paths to underlying services and data you see towards the bottom. The essential principles shown across the callout show separation of management and data planes. Notice only SQL analysts have access to XDBC. FHIR clients only access to FHIR REST APIs, FHIR management only to management APIs, and customer deployment service administrators, all the way on the bottom left, only to the deployment portal configuration. The idea is, in practice, IT operations or non-data analysts, non-SME resources with data will manage deployment configuration. So it's important that that both management personas should not have access to PHI or other sensitive data. Zero Trust MTLS. The two outer highlights show the identity, the IAM fundamental pillar we reviewed earlier in play here, the key ingredient to the identity control trust plane that may include MFA, SSO, and or OAuth, shown with the two outer highlights, then complemented with the transport trust plane with the two inner highlights with certificate TLS. Here, separate super servers acting as distinct service endpoints for web and XDBC. Recall, SQL analysts should be assured they're only talking to the XDBC endpoint and FHIR personas only the web endpoint. In pure MTLS, the server would also be validating the client customer certificate. But if we have a bending allowance, if we're not there yet, then the principles still apply if even just for half of those 2 points. A key here, also these principles relevant inside the perimeter. As you see some of the stars inside that box, we'll look at that more later. Also considered untrusted. The enforcement of the transport layer with TLS is certificates. Best practices here, the highlights show the certificate endpoints. Can you see the flawed trust principle here? And we'll come back to that. Think about it. We'll notice web and SQL mycompany.com with the domains and the certificates versus my company or my node, as well as no sharing or wildcarding. These distinct certificate endpoints assure the client is talking to the right service endpoint. They're not talking to the node. This prevents masquerading services, etc. Certificate validation is important also. It's not enough that you're holding the certificate, checking things such as expiration and ideally the SAN, the subject alias name. Here, the domain. Coming back to what the flawed trust principle is. Does anybody see that? Okay, so the center inner star is calling out a certificate on the web superserver. But you notice there's a yellow band, no TLS. So this is violating the relevance to the inside the internal perimeter. So all components should have certificates even within the internal component. So even though the web server has the external certificate endpoint, so its communication is internal between itself and IRIS, the super server, it should still be encryption in transit with TLS and a certificate. Whitelisting. Notice the star at the upper top of the firewall. Whitelisting relies on static CIDRs, IP ranges. It's important for removing public internet access with defense in depth to strong authentication and MTLS enforcements, protects against modern security vulnerabilities like port scanning, lateral movements, DDoS, exploitation of weak default or weak configurations, reduced attack surface, blast radius, etc. This can be supported in various corporate use cases with enterprise, small company, distributed, remote, and mobile workforces with understood complexity as you go towards the right of that list. Generally, most corporate networks follow network best practices, which include static CIDRs. Varied solutioning is VPNs, NAT gateways, NAT pools, SaaS brokers like Zscaler with the necessary themes centralized egress. Mobile or remote becomes more challenging. Typically, that is solution with the cloud firewalls. And the challenges understood is appreciating that varied level of complexity for enabling this if it's not already, pending the networking use case. Securing REST APIs, token handling. The deployment user highlight on the left shows basic auth password redirect through the authenticate flow that will exchange for a bearer token. That flow is using an identity token, less than ideal, as identity tokens should not be used for authorization. They contain sensitive data such as email and have a longer lifetime, so it's not typical that the identity token is passed through to the server. The FHIR client, however, highlight shows strong authentication with OAuth using access tokens, which are intended for authorization that have shorter lifetime and can leverage refresh tokens for automated refresh and can be invalidated. And last but not least, the restricted principal. Here is an example of IRIS access to external data repositories. The restricted principal callouts you see here are general practices for data repositories, not necessarily specific to AWS, S3 buckets. Applicability of this example is a number of managed service and cloud-hosted product lines rely on customer-hosted S3 buckets. Cloud SQL, OMAP, HCC, to name a few. Customer self-managed through an IRIS product deployment portal. We have been seeing in the previous diagrams that portion to the diagram on the left. Note here, the restricted principal is an example of role-based access control tied to cloud role assumed from IRIS as it integrates with external cloud resourcing, including customer-owned data repositories. Some key points with the configuration here that are often missed, the enforce secure transport, that's not included by default, and the scoped resource. So it tends to be more of a habit to just expose at the root at the bucket level, but that would give InterSystems access to all of the subpaths and all of the data underneath that bucket. So we champion more that there's specific subpathing that's at the root of privilege so that InterSystems can only access that, which should be specifically relative to whatever the data repository service is. The reason being there could be either misconfiguration where the customer may put data across the bucket unintentionally, or they might put sensitive data in the bucket that InterSystems would have access to. Okay, so we made it. One thing to call out here, the synopsis did include a reference to key management, but I took that out because my esteemed manager had a session on that, so I put a reference to that session. You can fall back to that to get more details about that. Hopefully the takeaway resonating, the configuration practices here are direct shared customer responsibility as part of configuring ISC hosted products, and the same that can be applied to customer hosted applications. Thank you.